So as I said, we've been exploring Christina Baldwin's book, The 7 Whispers, 7 gems of wisdom that are applicable really no matter who we are, where we are, and they help us deal with all sorts of life's challenges. Today we're going to be looking at the last one, the one that teaches us and encourages us to return to the world. But the journey we've taken began with the idea of the gem of maintaining peace of mind, something very solid and core to spiritual practice, really, very solid and core to unity. Unity was founded as a prayer movement and a very particular kind of prayer of affirmation and prayer of sitting in the silence, very much the practice of learning to maintain peace of mind, allowing ourselves the ability to quiet the mind so that we can be receptive to inner guidance and inner wisdom. We then explored the idea of moving at the pace of guidance. And inherent in just that phrase alone are some key ideas, the idea of moving at a particular pace, suggesting that we shouldn't always be moving in our lives in the same pace, that there are times that we really do need to slow down and times when we need to speed up. But most importantly, connecting that movement in our lives going forward with whatever guidance we are receiving, to let it be what informs us, to let it be what directs us. We took a look at the idea of practicing certainty of purpose, that there is a reason that we are here, that we have incarnated into life at this time in history, in this place, and it doesn't mean that we always like everything that's happening. Have you noticed that? But the fact that we may not like what is happening either individually or collectively does not negate the spiritual truth, with a capital T, that we're here for a reason, we're here for a purpose. And to the extent that we are as open and as willing to yield to that purpose in our soul's purpose, to that extent we will feel fulfilled in our lives and we will be doing the job that we are here to do. We then took a look at the idea of asking for what we need and offering what we can, realizing that there is a reciprocity involved in life itself, that it's important to be aware of whatever it is that we might need emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, and to not be ashamed or embarrassed or think it's a sign of weakness to ask for the help that we need. And at the same time, to also realize that there is a reciprocity, that we ask and we are also invited to offering what we can. And the offering is going to be different for each of us based on what we have, what we know, our life experiences, what we can bring to the table of life. But as long as we are willing to look at both parts of that whisper, willing to ask for what we need and offer what we can, then we find ourselves in an exquisite balance. And of course, we looked at the whisper, surrender to surprise. And boy, some of us have been really needing to work with that one, right? Surrendering to surprise. And surrender doesn't mean giving up. And that's really important for us right now, I think. That surrender doesn't mean giving up. It means yielding into. And what we're yielding into is the reality that there is a higher energy, a higher order that we don't always see at first glance. But when we believe, if we believe, as we do in unity, that there is one power and one presence in the universe, God the good omnipotent, you can change the name, you don't have to use the word God if the God word freaks you out, but that there is a presence and power in the universe, and it is benevolent, not malevolent. If we truly believe that, and it's a core teaching in unity, so I assume that we believe that, if we believe it, then there's no place where God is not. That presence, that energy is everywhere equally present. And so knowing that, it becomes a bit easier to surrender to surprise, the surprises that aren't the happy surprises. It requires that as we surrender, we never lose sight of the potential goodness within the surprise. And we work hard to see it, we work hard to bring it forth, and we are willing to remain engaged and involved. And then last week, as we came together very much as a spiritual community, I don't know how it struck you, but it really struck me last Sunday, how important being together is at times that are challenging for us, to come together and to look around and see our familiar faces and to know that we're connecting not just with those in the room, but those on the other side of our live stream, to come together in an energy, of community, an energy of love. And one of our fundamental practices in unity is very much this whisper of Christina's, the idea of loving the folks in front of us. And it doesn't mean just the folks in front of us that we like. It doesn't mean loving just the ones that look like us or think like us or act like us or choose like us. Those are the ones that are easy to love, right? You know, Jesus said, "What reward do you have if you love only those who love you?" Even the tax collectors do that. He couldn't have been more blunt when you think about it than when he said, "What reward do you have if you love only those who love you?" Even the tax collectors do that. He said the reward came when we love those that are difficult and different. Usually those are kind of synonymous, right, when it comes to relationships. That the reward comes when we learn to love those that are difficult to love. What is the reward? Was he talking about stuff we were going to get? No, I don't think a teacher of consciousness works at that level. I think he was working at the level of consciousness that when we love, when it is difficult for us to love or to be loving, that what happens is we grow inside. We expand the capacity for compassion and kindness within us. That's what the reward is. And the growth that we make within ourselves, no one and nothing can ever take that away. So every hard one lesson you have learned, every significant overcoming you've ever had in your life, that is yours, and no one and nothing can ever take that from you. It's what builds you up and makes you be the stronger, better version of yourself that you are right now, and that you will grow into even more of that. And so in each of these whispers, I've shared the whisper as Christina has written about it to some extent, and then my own take on it. And today it is the whisper of returning to the world. Return to the world. Say that with me. Return to the world. And just pause for a moment and be aware of when you say that or you hear that or think that, the idea of returning to the world. What does that mean to you? What does that mean to you? Is there an image that comes to mind? Is there a thought that comes to mind? A memory that comes to mind? Or a place that comes to mind? Return to the world. What comes to mind and what does that feel like? In a way, these whispers work in kind of a circular motion. Return to the world. We started with the idea of maintaining peace of mind. And one of the preliminary steps to maintaining peace of mind is a very basic step in a lot of spiritual practice. And it is the step of being aware of the breath. And think about it. When you take a breath, what are you taking into your body? You are taking in the gift of the trees that have given what we take in as air. Return to the world. Take a breath, but take it very consciously. And then release it. We're taking in a wonderful gift of the world of nature itself all of the time. We are not separate from nature. We are an expression of it and very much one with it. In the chapter, Christina writes about the challenges of urbanization and industrialization and the speed of life, all things that we in this spiritual teaching and practice understand and can see and can relate to. She writes, the closest we get to comprehension, though, is to say that we ought to realign ourselves with nature, as though this were an option, as though we were separate, as though we have dominion over the miraculous biosphere that designed us from the molecule up. We are already one with it one with us. But in many ways, when we think of this idea of returning to the world, the real world, the world of nature, sometimes we look at nature as an inconvenience. Have you ever looked at nature as an inconvenience? Have you ever thought, oh, it's raining, I can't do what... Now that would fit more in Seattle maybe than in San Diego, but here in San Diego, have you noticed how differently we drive at the hint of rain, right? We just don't know how to do it, right? Have you noticed how, and maybe you don't do this, but I know plenty of folks who do, the hint of drizzly weather, suddenly it's like our plans have to be majorly adjusted, as if nature, the very natural part of the world itself, is something that we need to separate ourselves from. But you know what's funny about that? Is only adults do that. Kids, before too much adult interference. Kids don't do that. I can remember fondly, I don't know, Jennifer's sitting up here, I don't know if her mind's going there. I can remember fondly, Jennifer, my daughter, our daughter, whenever it was raining, the one thing she wanted to do was to go outside and dance in the rain. And so many times I can remember when we lived in Scripps Ranch, we lived on a cul-de-sac, that it would be raining and we're out there dancing in the rain. And what do you think I wanted to have with me? What do you think she didn't want to have with her? Therein is the difference. Or I think of one of the fondest memories, I think, of sitting in a jacuzzi. Yeah, you remember that too. Sitting in a jacuzzi, wanting to go out and just relax in a jacuzzi and thinking, oh, we can't because it is raining. Now stop for a moment and think of absolutely how ridiculous that is. I mean, is that not totally ridiculous? What do you do when you get in a jacuzzi? You get very wet. What do you do when you're sitting in a jacuzzi in rain? You get wet from the bottom and you get wet from the top. You just get wet. It's this attitude, right? This attitude that maybe some of us have of nature being an inconvenience, when actually it is something that can feed us, can nurture us, can teach us, something I think that we need to treat a little bit better than maybe we have the very precious planet that we live on. Khalil Gibran said, "Forget not that the earth delights to feel your bare feet and the winds long to play with your hair." Those beautiful words. Forget not that the earth delights to feel your bare feet and the winds long to play with your hair. There are a few lessons that I want to share with you that I think we can get from the real world, from nature itself, of what we can learn and how we can feel uplifted. And I encourage you to kind of think about your own list. Think about your own list. What does the real world, what does nature offer you? What does it teach you? Here are a few ideas. Number one, the real world, nature, sets a pace that works. Sets a pace that works. Say that with me. Sets a pace that works. It's a pace that is built on sprouting, on growth, on harvest, and on rest. The seasons, right? Sprouting, growth, harvest, rest. One of the things that has been a challenge, and maybe even still an ongoing challenge for me, and maybe you can relate to this, is my tendency to want to approach everything in my life with the same energy, the same pace, the same effort, nonstop. And I don't think that's a healthy way to be. I think that there is a biorhythm, maybe, there is a more gentle, more aware way of being in the world that nature itself teaches us. In its cycle of sprouting, in its cycle of growth, in its cycle of harvest, in its cycle of rest. I don't know that on an individual basis it means concrete, very separate kinds of phases, but I do think that it suggests a broader way of being in the world that includes a rhythm and a flow and a change. And certainly we can just very generally look at the phases, the chronological phases of life, right? As our bodies change, as our interests change, as our wisdom grows, as our experiences deepen, there's a certain ebb and flow to that, and phases and stages. Would you not agree? But I think that there's also a gem of wisdom in that, just to the way that we approach the ordinariness of our life itself. Emerson wrote in his essay on nature, "Adopt the pace of nature. Her secret is patience." Do any of you wrestle with patience? I still do. How many of you would raise your hand or nod your head to identifying yourself as an incredibly patient person? Not impatient, but patient. Wonderful, wonderful. I want to hang around with you guys. How many of you would say there's some room for improvement in your own life with impatience, you know, when someone ahead of you in line or on the freeway isn't going the pace that you think that they ought to be going, or you find yourself noticing that the sign in the checkout line said 10 items or less, and the person in front of you has 11. You know, little things like that, just little things like that. You can just, it's fun to go, oh, I'm noticing that. I wonder what that's about. I wonder what that's about. This idea of setting a pace that works. And I do not mean in any way to suggest that I know what that pace is for you. I don't. But I see myself oftentimes as someone perhaps posing some good questions and some good, have you thought about this or have you thought about that, more than saying, here are the answers. And therein is a huge difference between unity and most religion, would you not say? Most religion says, here are the answers and you'd better follow them, believe them, and definitely don't question them, right? And unity says, here are some things we think are true. Here are some things that we believe, but you're welcome to just take and pick and choose what seems to strike a chord of truth in you, and at most, test it out. See what works in the laboratory of your life, right? So the real world nature sets a pace that works, and we can learn from that. The real world nature is abundant and efficient. Think about it, is abundant and efficient. I always think about the craziness of me planting my vegetable garden at the beginning of the year and taking a few tomato seeds and, oh my God, then spending come harvest time hours upon hours upon hours blanching tomatoes and then making marinara sauce because, gosh darn it, nature is so abundant, right? But also so very efficient. Nature doesn't waste anything. Doesn't waste anything. We have a beautiful tree in the front of our yard. I should know the name of it, I think it's a liquid amber. It's huge, and I love watching the colors of those leaves just change and then fall to the ground, and know that those leaves are doing what? They're going to be fertilizing, nurturing that soil so it can grow even bigger and even more beautiful. And yet there's a part of me that says, well, it's messy, let me clean it up. I don't, but there's a part of me that thinks, oh, but it's a little, but it's the very thing that the cycle of life needs, right? That the cycle of life needs. Nature is abundant and yet doesn't waste anything. Aristotle observed, nature does nothing uselessly. Nothing uselessly. And Emerson wrote, for everything you have missed, you have gained something else, and for everything you gain, you lose something else. It's like those beautiful words, this too shall pass. And that's true of everything. The things we label good, the things we label neutral, and the things we label bad. Impermanence, this too shall pass. A third of the four I want to share, the real world nature heals. Heals. How many of you have found that sometimes the very best medicine for your soul, when you really feel either frightened or angry or are grieving over something not turning out the way you wanted it to, that one of the most healing things you can do is get out of your house, no matter how big, small, or beautiful it might be, and get out where? In nature. And even if you can't escape to, a beautiful place, maybe you can't get in the car and drive out to the ocean or to the mountains or to a lake, just getting outside, looking around, looking up, never ever losing sight of your connection, your incredible connection with nature, but also the vastness of it. How healing can that be, right? To help put us in a different frame of mind. It worries me when I see too many of our young people, or even people my age, spending too much time either inside or at the opposite end of a device instead of out in expanse, out in openness. Consider these inspiring words from Anne Frank. Yes, Anne Frank. The best remedy for those who are afraid, lonely, or unhappy is to go outside, somewhere where they can be quiet, alone with the heavens, nature, and God, because only then does one feel that all is as it should be and that God wishes to see people happy amidst the simple beauty of nature. As long as this exists, and it certainly always will, I know that then there will always be comfort for every sorrow, whatever the circumstances may be. And I firmly believe that nature brings solace in all troubles. Is that not powerful and humbling words? Christina Baldwin wrote a statement in this chapter that spoke to me. Nature is the only thing big enough to hold us in our moments of greatest pain and joy. Nature is the only thing big enough to hold us in our moments of greatest pain and joy. Some of you have written to me this week how much you are still struggling with the events of last week. Or was it 2 weeks ago now? I can't remember. I'm in a bit of a time warp. If you find yourself there, I really encourage you, get outside. Go to an outside happy place for you, whatever that is, and just be out there for a little while and take that in and see the beautiful power and abundance and reciprocity of nature itself, and know that you are still part of that, and that is still part of you. And if that doesn't work, then try some dirt therapy. Go dig in the dirt. Go plant something. Go rake something. But get your hands in Mother Earth. And the last is this, the real world nature teaches. Christina suggests we can plant something, even one geranium can teach us. Amen to that. Would you give me an amen to that? Amen. Amen. Nature does teach. Nature does teach. Nature unfolds at its own rhythm and its own pace. Let us absorb a little bit more of that in the way we approach our lives. So as I close, I just want to share with you a couple things that you might want to ponder, maybe as you go for a walk outside this afternoon or tomorrow morning. Maybe ponder some of these simple questions. When was the last time that you returned to the world in a significant way? When was the last time that you returned to the world in a significant way? Second, what are some of the clearest lessons you've personally learned from nature? Not my stuff, but what are some of the lessons that you've personally learned from nature? Write them down. Write them down. And the last, if you were to liken your life today to one of the 4 seasons, what would it be? And don't let your mind just go to maybe the obvious, well, if I'm in my 80s or 90s, it's the winter of my life. Don't do that. Don't do that, because let me reframe that question a little bit more. Not based on your body, based on your soul. Based on your soul. That's a very different question. If you were to liken your life today, your soul life today, to one of the 4 seasons, what would it be and why? If you spend some time with those questions, I think you might come up with some very helpful and wise answers for yourself that could be very healing and very uplifting at this point in time. Namaste.